Joining me now, Gregory T. Angelo. He is the president of the Log Cabin Republicans, an organization for LGBTQ people and straight allies who support Republicans, and he's been on my show several times. Gregory, good to have you with us.
I am nonetheless grateful for you having me on.
Look, it is tough circumstances, okay. Gregory. Yeah. Here's the bottom line. I'm just trying to figure this out. Maybe you can help our audience, being a member of the gay community. Basically, This guy, Omar Martin, scopes out this gay bar, right? He'd been there 2 or 3 times surveilling it. Yep. He comes in, and in cold blood, he executes 49 gay people, wounds another 50. Now, he was not targeting anybody. He was not targeting, people that go out at night. He was not targeting drinkers or Catholics, right? He was targeting gays. 50 of them got executed in cold blood. Why can't the Obama administration call this out for what it is?
It's perplexing. They seem to have a very difficult time calling evil by its name, and in this case, that evil is radical Islamic terrorism. I believe the president did finally refer to it as such just over the course of the last week. But nonetheless, there is a hurdle that not only President Obama but his members of the administration seem to have in talking about the cause of not only this Orlando massacre and this Orlando terrorist attack, but what happened in San Bernardino, what happened in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Here at Log Cabin Republicans, we have no problem calling out religious extremism that leads to violence by its name. Right? There are times where Christians promote hate, and boy, this administration and Democrats never hesitate to point out those instances where Christian extremists are preaching hate from the pulpit. Well, here we have an instance where Islam, and I'm not talking about all Islam, but there are people who have a radical view of the interpretation of the Quran, and that leads them to commit horrendous terrorist acts. And unless we actually focus on the reason why, the root cause of this terror, we're not going to be able to formally address it. In the bumper before this segment, you had actually played Loretta Lynch over the weekend saying that they would be releasing an edited transcript of this terrorist phone calls to police, transcript edited such that most, if not almost, the preponderance of the references to allegiance to ISIS or what might have radicalized them will have been scrubbed from that. So if we actually want to get at the root cause of what caused this terror, this is not the time for being a wilting flower. This is a time for confronting those reasons head on.
Now, look, Gregory, there's no question that we have an administration that simply refuses to call the enemy by its name. They were incapable of calling this execution against gay people for what it is. Trump, on the other hand, said, "Our nation stands together in solidarity with the members of Orlando's LGBT community."
Yep.
And he called the massacre an assault on the ability of free people to live their lives, love who they want, and express their identity. Now, I got to tell you, Gregory, I've been following politics and commenting on it as a journalist in print and broadcast for a very, very long time, longer than you ever want to know. I can't recall any Republican presidential candidate actually acknowledging the existence of the LGBT community, let alone say that he's in solidarity with them. Am I right?
Yeah, that speech, you're 100% correct. That speech that Mr. Trump gave 1 week ago, it was Monday of last week in New Hampshire, was historic. And it was historic for the reasons that you said. Not only have you had a Republican presumptive presidential nominee directly reference the LGBT community, like that alone would be a historic first. But he did it at a time when other Republicans were tiptoeing around the reason why the people who were targeted at Pulse nightclub in Orlando were targeted. And then he went one farther and appealed to the LGBT community for support. While at the same time offering his condolences and solidarity. Now, Log Cabin Republicans, just to clarify, has not offered any sort of formal endorsement to Mr. Trump as yet. We're still in the midst of those considerations. But nonetheless, that shouldn't undercut or underestimate the fact that what Mr. Trump did was actually show true leadership on these issues, and actually many others in the party followed suit, where you had Mitt Romney, Newt Gingrich, Ted Cruz, Paul Ryan, Marco Rubio, then all mentioned the LGBT community or gays and lesbians in their respective statements on Orlando. We can have philosophical differences on things like whether government should be in the marriage business or whether employment non-discriminations are the purview of the federal, the state, or the municipal government, or whether this is something that's handled by the free markets. But in Orlando, 49 members of the LGBT community and straight allies died. They died at the hands of radical Islamic terrorists.
I want you to get your comment on this, Greg. I just read this earlier. The interview that Trump had with the advocate, one of the questions was, what would you do to combat anti-gay prejudice? And Trump said that he would amend the 1964 Civil Rights Act to include a ban of discrimination based on sexual orientation. Now, this is landmark for a Republican presidential nominee to do, and it's not picked up in the mainstream media anywhere. So I got.
That's right.
I mean, why?
John, I've been saying it for months. Back in 2000, Mr. Trump said that in an interview, nonetheless, with a gay magazine, no less, right?
Right.
This was an interview with The Advocate. And he had said that the best way to allow for non-discrimination protections for LGBT individuals, although at the time it was just gay individuals based on sexual orientation, was amending the Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation non-discrimination. That's incredible for a number of reasons. Number one, because he made this he made a call for this legislation back in 2000. This was 16 years ago. Mm-hmm. And number two, it's notable because he's very much ahead of his time. This is actually a battle that the LGBT rights organizations around the country are having right now, and that is to amend the Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation and gender identity non-discrimination provisions. Mm-hmm. Time and again, if you go back as far as August of last year, I'd been asked what my thoughts were on the potential for a Trump nomination for LGBT rights in the United States. And I said that if he were nominated, he would be the most pro-gay Republican presidential nominee in history. Mm-hmm. And everything that he has done in the time since has actually borne out what my prediction was to be true. Mm-hmm. So at the very least, I think Mr. Trump would do no harm to LGBT rights. He might even be, as he said in his speech in New Hampshire, a friend. Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to a lot of those members of the LGBTQ community who have come out for Trump have been beaten, they've been under assault, they've been ridiculed, they've been mocked. What's the deal with this?
You know, I was out in California a week before these attacks in Orlando, standing in solidarity with a gentleman by the name of Juan Hernandez,
right,
who is a member of Log Cabin Republicans of San Francisco. Mm-hmm. He's also happens to be an out gay Latino Trump supporter. And he was brutally attacked in San Jose, California, when he, following his attendance at a rally at which Mr. Trump spoke 2 weeks ago, mm-hmm. simply because he was expressing support for his presidential candidate of choice, mm-hmm. Which is something that's protected under the First Amendment, freedom of speech in the United States. He wasn't antagonizing anyone. He was just trying to get back to his car, and this mob of people who were not only waving Mexican flags, but who were burning American flags, accosted Juan, attacked him, preyed upon him for violence, and he was just one of a number of victims of violence from liberals, simply because not only was he trying to express his First Amendment right to support the presidential candidate of his choice, but he was specifically expressing his support for Donald Trump, and he was targeted as such.
I mean, it's just unbelievable out there and again, this was not reported widely in the mainstream media. Now, obviously, for those in your community, Greg, it takes a lot of courage to be able to stand up for what you believe in. We'll see how it plays out. Final question. Do you favor a ban on assault weapons to those on a terrorist watch list?
I've not made any determinations on that one way or the other. I know this is something that Mr. Trump has called for, and it's also something that the NRA has hesitations about. I don't know too intimately the way one gets on the terrorist watch list or how one gets off the terrorist watch list. And I have reservations regarding those determinations, right? Could anyone be put on the terrorist watch list for any reason? What is the litmus test that one
the
has,
issue.
right?
We don't know who's on there, and it's
Right.
proven often to be way off base. We've had congressmen on there. We're out of time. I want to thank Gregory T. Angelo, who's the president of the Log Cabin Republicans. Hey, man, thanks for being with us.